This is the Creator Podcast with Jeff and Gus. I am Gus. It's episode 3.
That's right, and I am Jeff. And today I think we want to talk about the blank canvas.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean we're going to be talking about nothing, uh, which would be terrible. But no, it's like I feel like so many people who make art, they go through these like periods where like I don't know what to make, or they go through, artist block. Same thing with writer's block, whatever. I feel like that's something I wanted to kind of tackle with you.
Right, yeah, it's kind of the idea of, I guess, getting some inspiration or, I want to try something new. I want to do something, but where do I start? How do I get going with something like that?
Yeah. Yep. And we're going to dive into that. So, how do you deal with that personally?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the project. I know you, I mean, you're making art left and right all day, every day. For me, usually I'll have a project that'll come up that it's either a personal project or something like a commission thing or something that I have to do. So I think a lot of times if I'm doing a sculpture, it comes about a little differently. If I'm doing a painting, it's a little different. So
Yeah.
for me, and it's probably completely different than what you do. I mean, your imagination is limitless. I can't say the same for myself. So a lot of times I will try to Google references for things if I need them, but
Yeah.
I'm always careful not to get influenced by references too much because I feel like that's a bad slope to go down.
Yeah. I mean, unless I'm doing something that's a specific character that's not mine, I try to steer clear from that kind of stuff. But I mean, for me, like what I want to say is the best advice I think for anyone who they're like, I don't know what to make. I think if you just start going at it, you're gonna find your way. For the most part, like if you just start applying paint and you're drawing something, you're at least exercising that motion, and you could start to see colors happening and maybe shapes. And depending on what you need to make, like if you have a certain thing in mind that you have to have done, then you might want to do some rough thumbnails, and keep those super loose, and you'll find something you like. I'm sure. It's just you just got to get started. You can't say you're gonna do it and then play Xbox, or say you're gonna do it, but then you're like, oh, I kind of need groceries. So like if you keep you keep putting it off, you're just not gonna do it ever, and it's gonna pain you every time you think about it.
Right, I remember you mentioned that. I remember back when I was in college. Well, in college, like I was working overnights and barely had any time to do anything. But I remember a lot of kids. So I went to school for media arts and animation, which a lot of the kids that went to that program, I think, were intending to make video games. I think that was, an aspiration of a lot of kids. Oh, I want to make video games. Most of the kids, I don't want to say most, but a lot of the kids, I feel like, played video games. So they thought,
Yeah,
oh, I play video games, I can make video games. And so what they would call doing research was playing video games. Oh
yeah,
well, I need to see what the characters look like, and I got to see how the levels are designed, and so let me do some research and play a video game for hours on end, and that seemed to be very unproductive. So I'd say yeah, steer clear of something like that.
yeah. I mean, yeah, for sure. Like I'm still doing those bills that we talked about in episode 1,
Right? Yeah.
and I'm working on them right now. And it's like I've done so many where I don't think about it at all. Like it's just kind of it's on autopilot. Like I could have this conversation and jump in another one, and they'll get done in front of me. So I think the more you exercise that muscle, you don't have to worry about it. It's just like you're so in touch with your own inner self and your creativity that things are just going to happen. It takes a long time, but I think it's there inside of everybody, I feel like.
Yeah. And for the new listeners, Gus basically has to paint on U.S. currency. So in this project you're working on, it's basically every single bill that you're painting on is a blank canvas in essence.
Yeah. What happens is it's blank, and then I add my first layer of paint, which is usually white or black or orange, and then from there I might start drawing, and then after the drawing comes like more paint just to fill it in and clean it up and any little details. But yeah, there's no, oh, I'm gonna make some, it's just kind of the weird little shapes I paint on there. That's the quickest part, and that sometimes shows me what's gonna happen next. But
And you,
it's
you just let your mind take over from there when you start seeing things in the shapes, right?
Oh yeah, a little bit, yeah. And every approach is kind of different, and but I could do that same thing. Like I made a book I put out on my Instagram called Plot Vision, and it became like an activity book because I wanted to help people create things and get inspired and all that because people always ask me about that. So it's it does little exercises like that where I'll have a scribble shape, a very simple scribble, and then I'll draw from that scribble like 18 characters or 10 characters, and then I'll leave blank ones for you to do your own thing too. So it kind of like sparks that. It's almost like using this muscle of like where you turn nothing into something and you constantly do it. And at the end of the book, you're supposed to find kind of how your style is. Because I think when you see something, whatever you see in that pattern or weird design, that's usually your true self seeing that. That's my thought on that. Like if you look at a cloud or any kind of texture.
Yeah, so it seems like for that, it's people they want to know how would Gus scribble. Let me try and see how Gus would scribble. But then you let them do their own scribbles.
Yeah, and there's different then there's different prompts and little things like that I added in the book. But I mean, and by book it's only like 25 pages, real simple kind of thing. But
Yeah, and so like for blank pages, you're talking about just scribble on a blank page kind of thing. I will say one regret I have is I have, I don't know, a million and one sketchbooks laying around.
yeah,
And I've always been this person where I'm like, ooh, I'm afraid to touch that sketchbook because it's brand new. It's really fresh. I don't want to scribble on a page because then I'll ruin it. And I constantly have to tell myself like, what the hell is the point of the sketchbook then if you're not gonna just draw on it? So anytime I need like a piece of paper, I'll just grab one of my random blank sketchbooks and start sketching in it because I have to get over this fear that like I'm gonna ruin a sketchbook. And and they're
yeah.
they're so cheap too. So I'm just like, what's the worst that could happen? Is I fill a sketchbook up with doodles and then I just buy another one?
Right, yeah, it's almost like that's what you'd want to do. I think I understand that though. It's like you're thinking, well, I don't want to draw this stupid, crappy thing. I want you. It's like you want to make this masterpiece sketchbook. As someone looks through your sketchbook, they're like, oh, "Wow, Da Vinci."
Right. Like
Like
God forbid somebody sees something bad I did.
yeah, yeah. And I kind of get on the opposite. Like if I need an idea, sometimes I might get a crazy project thrown at me, and I'll be like, I'll look at my sketchbooks for extra inspiration,
Hmm.
and from that I could write a story or create characters and this is if I'm in like a panic where the one day I had to make a book in like a day and I was kind of panicking. So I
Like
was
a like
like,
a comic book, like an illustrated thing, or
no, it was more of it was gonna be called this is kind of funny. It was gonna be called The Monsters Within or something like that. And it was gonna be no Monsters I Know. And it was gonna be a different weird monster. And then what I did is I ended up combining that book with this Plot Vision book I was working on, and I just turned it and made it make sense so that I could finish it in like one day. And I wanted to list it on online just so it would like attract people for that day. So but I needed character ideas because I just felt pressure,
right.
to fill up all those pages. But yeah, but just grabbing a sketchbook and it could be the littlest weird thing that you do, and I feel like sometimes there's a beauty in that. Like you forget you made it. You're like, oh, I did that little thing. You know what I mean? And then, but you see something more in it than what maybe someone else would see in it. So I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if I actually find myself getting inspired by some of my older stuff that I'll flip through and I'll see stuff. It's like, oh, I remember I drew that. Why didn't I take that further? That was a funny idea. Or the other day I actually came across an old notebook where I was writing down ideas for board games. And some of these I went into farther details than I remember doing. And I was like, oh yeah, that was that idea I had. Why don't I do something with that? So I see it and I'm like, I get a renewed sense of like, oh wow, a new idea, even though it's an old idea I came up with.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's because it's all from you, and I think you could either hate it more because of that reason, or you could love it and appreciate it more, and see the potential you saw at that moment. I kind of feel like as artists, we get in these different zones like constantly. Like you sometimes feel like I don't want to do anything. You know, you're like don't want to create. I know the typical thing for a lot of artists is it's like the stereotype things they say is that they're lazy, that they don't get stuff done fast, that they, put things off till last minute, all kinds of things like that. So I've always tried to fight that in myself because I was the most lazy person I've ever met when I was younger. So
Yeah, I find I don't know that I'm ever lazy. I mean, you mentioned like light writer's block or that kind of thing before. I think sometimes there's not a lot of motivation. I think that happens to everybody where you're kind of just burned out a little bit. It happened this year actually with like pumpkin carving.
yeah,
By the end of the season, I had actually I just today I chucked all the rest of my pumpkins back in the woods by my compost pile, and I had the intention of carving them up and coming up with some new ideas for trying out different things, but I don't know. I was so done with pumpkins. I was kind of like,
yeah.
I want to move on to the next thing. Like, what's next? Like, maybe I want to try a sculpture. Like, I want to do a painting. Like, I was just kind of at that point. I'm like, let's do something new. And I don't know if there's anything really wrong with that. Moving on to something different.
No, there's definitely not. I mean, I feel like for myself, what will happen to me is I'll get in this thing where if you feel like it, that's everything, which I guess that's what causes the delays. But if you get like if you feel that inspiration or you feel that you get so much more excited, the work almost does itself. But so it's all like how you look at the thing you have to do. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, last night I started working on a project and this happens usually a lot, is I'll have 101 things going at one time. But last night I had this thought in my head. I don't know if you've ever seen Parks and Rec,
Yeah.
but there's the guy John Ralphio and his sister Mona Lisa. Um, I won't give out a spoiler here, but it's been out for a while. So there's a part where they're dancing in a cemetery and they're singing a song about don't be suspicious.
Yeah.
They're like, don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious. And they're doing this funny dance. And it was so funny to me. And in my head, I'm like, I got to turn that into a pixel art animation. I saw it in my head of the two of them dancing, and it's a looped GIF. And I was like, that has to be a pixel art animation. I don't know why I thought pixel art, but just in my head, it worked. So I
Right.
started working on that animation last night at like 10 at night or something because I was like, I got to get this out of my head and start it at least. So I have that started. So hopefully I can finish it and drop it on Instagram at some point. It should be pretty good.
Yeah, like so you were all in the moment, you got all excited and like that's probably why you did it. I mean, like today I had to recreate characters that were like at first they were too creepy for a kids cartoon is what I was told. So I had to redesign them to be younger looking, which at first I get kind of like, well, I don't want to do that. Like I almost try to talk myself to saying, well, the originals are great and all these reasons why.
Right.
But then I think, well, this could be a really great opportunity, and then I really just make sure I have to pour myself into it and try to enjoy every little step, whether it's cleaning up a little mistake line. And these are the kind of things that I look back at my work a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. The more I look back, I've improved so much on all the little details than I used to. Like I used to kind of just do it and that was it. And I feel like as you get older as an artist, you could constantly grow. It's one of the only probably professions you could constantly just grow and improve and you know what I mean? Always just fix things up and look back and go, oh, I wasn't that great back then.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's not like what a surgeon says.
Yeah, it probably is. It probably is. Sadly, I don't know.
It's like,
I
oh
mean,
man, that first kidney transplant I did, I really botched that. But man, I'm
they
getting better.
they might say that. I don't know. I mean, that's a weird profession because I feel like not many artists probably go into that profession. But I feel like if
Surgeon?
it, yeah, but I feel like if a surgeon was an artist, it'd probably be very helpful, don't you think? Like that kind of eye-hand coordination.
Yeah, I suppose the eye-hand coordination part of it, knowing medical stuff is probably important too. But yeah, I see what you're saying. There is a bit of an art there. I mean, especially if you're doing like plastic surgery or something, you gotta
Yeah,
know
that
symmetry.
that or yeah, I just feel like and the same thing with dentistry. I feel like that's just you want these people to be really good with little details. I don't know, that's just maybe that's just me, but I always thought about that. Like,
Yeah, well, with dentistry specifically, I like a lot of their tools that they use. I use those for clay sculpting. Well, and a lot of sculptors use those. Like the
yeah.
little dental tools that they're using them to shape your tooth and to make sure it looks natural and stuff. But yeah, they're artists in that sense that they have to make realistic looking teeth.
Well, yeah, like funny enough, yeah, I know that people like celebrities will get new teeth done and they just go to a sculptor. Like they have a sculptor that does teeth only and they pay a fortune. But I was gonna say, I noticed when there's two different people that will clean my teeth. The one is a little bit of an artist. She sells her work once in a while, and she's so much more delicate than this lady who's just like she just kind of fell into the profession, I feel like. So like you know what I mean? It wasn't like I think she's dating the head dentist or something.
Oh,
So
that's drama.
yeah, oh yeah. So I always feel like she's killing me when I go to her compared to the woman that paints once in a while.
That's interesting because I mean, what a great topic, dentistry. But I feel like I had the same experience. Like I've had dentists who are like such a soft touch, and then some just really drill into you. I thought maybe that was just me, my experience, but I guess it's all over the place. Depends on who you go to.
Yeah, I mean they're just people and they're doing their thing and maybe they had a bad day and they're like, ah, teeth will rip apart.
Yeah,
So
different skills, different stuff. Yeah.
yeah, blank canvas of teeth. It happens. Um, yeah, let's see. I've wrote a few notes down here. Well, getting started, what to make. I was gonna say, if you could give yourself advice like 10 years ago, was there anything you would think up? Like what would you tell yourself?
Hmm. Yeah. Geez. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be pompous, but I'm like I feel like I'm doing everything that I could have done. I mean, I think you you get better and you learn things and you have more experience over time.
Yeah,
So there's definitely stuff that you were doing 10 years ago that wasn't the best approach, but
right.
you learn. So 10 years ago, I wouldn't have known to tell myself some of the stuff I've learned. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. It's like if you didn't do what you did back then, you wouldn't be where you are today.
Right.
And it's almost pointless to tell yourself something.
Right.
Like,
You wouldn't want to change the future.
yeah, usually you would. And some people definitely would want to make a different thing like that. Some kind of because every little decision I feel like in life, it really changes everything. Like it's almost like the butterfly effect, and the same thing goes for art. It's like it's the same stuff in a way. It's like you could mold it and shape it, and it's going to really affect everything moving forward, whether you realize it or not. You can never really sample it, but it's just a strange thing, that those little details you need, and that's what makes up today.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not I know we have some different views on some things, but I don't I always think like, you're kind of on the right path because it's the only path for me anyway. I feel like, everything you do, yeah, it changes your future, but it's going to be what it is. I don't know that it's predetermined or there's fate, but you know, it's you make decisions and things happen and you can't change the past, so you must be doing you must be on the right path.
Right. So you think the path is always the right path, the path of your
I don't know about being right, but it
yeah.
is the path.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, because time is linear to me until proven otherwise. But I could be wrong. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll find out by episode 180.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a good predictor of the future. I did a report on aliens in the sixth grade, the
Mhm.
gray aliens with the big eyes.
Yeah.
And in my report, I remember saying, well, so my theory was that aliens are us in the future because of all of the pollution, we'll need giant eyes, and because
Yeah.
we'll talk telepathically, we'll have small mouths, so we won't need to, talk with our mouths or whatever. And I said, so this will be us. We'll evolve into these by 2012. This is what
Oh
I said
wow.
in sixth grade. And I think I was off by a few thousand years, but I had that ambition because in my head I think I was like, as a sixth grader, well, 2012 is so far away. It's like that'll be so far, and there'll be so much advancement. That's what a sixth grader thinks, I guess.
It sounded really far away when we were kids. It really.
Yeah, yeah. I remember my teacher laughing at me, and I was like, oh, maybe that's not a good guess, but that's what it is.
Yeah. What a jerk teacher. I kind of wish you were right, just so you could walk in with your big huge eyes and go see.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it was, you know, 20, 2312 or something. I wasn't thinking. That's thousands of years, but I always thought that was interesting theory.
Yeah, I've heard that one a lot actually. I think that's like a common theory that we're just time traveling and that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. I have my own wacky beliefs when it comes to that stuff though.
Maybe we'll touch on that on a different episode.
Yeah, like the alien episode or something. Who knows? Um,
I'm sure the people want to know,
yeah. Well,
but
they should ask us, and then we'll dive into it.
yeah, today's all about that blank canvas, and it can be scary, the blank canvas. Now, if you're doing something like a commission for a client, let's say,
Yeah.
and let's say an artist out there listening has something where a client comes out and says, "Hey, I want you to design this character that's going to go on this pizza box or something." And
Yeah.
sometimes they'll give you some kind of guide rails or some ideas on where they want to go, but other times it's kind of like up in the air. So how do you start on something like that with the thought of, well, hopefully I get it right the first time and they like it, like you
Yeah.
know?
No, that's definitely a thing. Like it could cause fear, where you're like, I hope they like this.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, almost all the time, I ask for all the money up front. Uh, Worst case, I'll be like half now, half when it's finished. But I really don't like to show anybody the art until they get it. Like I don't like to be like, because that opens up doors for them to be like, well, I love it, but can you make the eyes green? And can you not have a cat? I want a dog. And it could drive you insane. So I've over the years I've learned to like do certain things a certain way. But when you start off, you kind of have to do it other ways. You want to really make the customers happy. But the thing is, I get this little thing where I say, if they like my art, they've seen enough of it.
Right.
That's why they're coming to me. I think they're gonna like it because I'm gonna. It's almost like it gives me a self confidence where I'm like, they're gonna like it because I'm gonna do it this way, like the way that they're used to seeing, that kind of thing. Whereas I used to approach it in a weird panicky way where it was like, oh, they want this and they want this and they want. I've had some crazy commissions like that where it's like 18 things in one painting, and it almost made me do it in a totally different style than what is me and what I'm used to. So, and then I'd almost feel bad like giving it to them. I'd be like, here it is, but it's like a weird version that's almost not me. So
Right. But if they're coming to you, then basically they should know what to expect. If they're coming to you and they're like, I want, a kid in a snowsuit next to a snowman, they're coming to Gus Fink, they're gonna get a really cool, creepy little kid with like probably like a gray sky, and that's what they should expect. And you don't want to do
yeah,
this iterative process where you're like, well, here's a couple sketches of how it might be. You're kind of like, this is what
yeah.
you wanted, this is how I do it, here it is, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, once in a while they might ask for a sketch to start with.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll do it anyways, but just to help me. But yeah, commissions are a weird thing. It's like one of the hardest. Sometimes I'll tell people, well, what's like four of your favorite works of mine that you like, and then I'll do it in that style because I have
Mm-hmm.
I have a few different styles. So sometimes if they're expecting something really really dark or soft and emotional, that kind of stuff. So. Uh,
Do you usually ever turn down commissions because it's something that you don't want to do?
Yeah, and now more often than I used to, but well, there's two different games to it. If you really don't want to do it, you ask for a higher price. because you're like, wow, this is gonna be trouble. You could almost tell by how they ask if it's gonna, you know what I mean? If it's very
Right.
specifics, you're like, ooh, this is gonna be a rough one. Um, it's always my favorite is when they're like, I want it to be this, do your thing, that kind of thing. When they always give you that creative freedom, it's
Yeah.
almost, and the best pieces come from that kind of stuff, which is funny. Like I could make prints of it later, sell like successful prints of it later. Whereas if something's very specific, most of the time I could never sell a print of it because no one else would care about that theme, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, I get that. And I think that's usually how I'll approach a tattoo artist as well. And tattoo artists usually they'll have their book of things that they've done. And a lot of times, often or not, they have like a style that you can kind of see and get an idea of what kind of work they do. So when I
Yeah.
go to a tattoo artist, I have an idea of what I want, but I'm not going to do sketches or anything. It's basically, here's my idea, do your thing, and just basically give them all the freedom because ultimately they have to enjoy the piece they're tattooing. If they don't enjoy it, it's not going to be a good experience for anyone.
Yeah, yeah, then you're unhappy. So, and that's such a more, semi-permanent thing to get. Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite on that. Like I've always sort of gone to a tattoo artist and be like, here you go, this is what I'm looking for, and usually it's exactly my drawing, or it's where I say do your thing to this kind of, this kind of drawing.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but I'm just weird with that kind of stuff. I've never liked for some reason when I started getting tattoos is because it was back at a time where everybody would get like flash, whatever is on the wall.
Right.
And so that made me think, well, I don't want to get that. I want to get stuff that nobody else has, which, just became like my own weird ideas, which I don't recommend getting tattooed until you're like 25 in my book, 26, maybe even older because your brain's not fully developed, I feel like.
Yeah, unless it's like on your upper thigh or something, then
Yeah. What do you think about that though? Like, I think it's been scientifically proven, but I really feel like your views on things are so different when you're fully an adult rather than when you're 21, where it's like you've only been an adult for a few years and you're not really there.
Yeah, definitely. I think there definitely is an evolution that happens. I think, maybe it's just called experience once you're, fully an adult. But I think you're kind of always learning and growing a little bit. But definitely, yeah, from like adolescence to adulthood, yeah, later teenage years, early 20s. That's definitely a period in your life where you're kind of learning as you go.
Yeah.
Um, and you could do some crazy things like get piercings and things like that, but tattoos are a little different. I don't know that, people necessarily regret tattoos they got because then it makes you feel bad about yourself. But uh, yeah, there's definitely something to be said about getting tattoos early. I think I want to say I was 19 the first time I got a tattoo, which is still young, but I didn't want to do it as soon as I was 18.
And that's you getting your first touches to your canvas, the blank canvas of Jeff Brown's walking around.
There it was. Yeah, my first touch was an entire back piece. That was my first tattoo. I said if you're gonna go for it, go big. So I just,
Yeah.
you know, I didn't want to be like, oh, I want to see how bad it hurts first with getting a little yin yang on my lower back. I was just like,
Yeah,
let's
and
if we're gonna go for it, let's go for it.
you just made me think of a story that happened to me when I was younger. So I had a roommate when I was younger that sort of slowly became obsessed with me. Like it'd start with you'd see him in public and he'd be wearing my shirt and then he'd be wearing my sunglasses and like he'd copy if we go to like a punk show and everyone go, hey, look, there's Gus, like look, it's Gus, because you just act like me and everything, and they always say it's the greatest version of flattery. But so he wanted to get tattoos because I had tattoos, and I was like, oh, okay. And he went in, and I was really straight edge. I know you're straight edge now. I don't say anything like that now, but I still don't do drugs or drink or anything like that. So I had like a drug free tattoo. It's been since covered up, but so he became straight edge because of me. I didn't ask him to, and he's like, I'm gonna get my first tattoo. He was just a fresh boy, no ink, and
Blank canvas.
yep. And then he went in, he came back home, he went to the mall, and I went with him for some reason, and he was showing everybody hy's new tattoo, and everyone was like, oh wow, wow, you got, drug free was the tattoo on his back. It was on his lower back, which is kind of the classic.
Yeah, the tramp stamp.
And so, anyways, he's showing it off to everybody, and everyone's like giving him, "Hey, that's awesome!" This is a long time ago when everybody in the world wasn't tattooed the way they are now. And this one kid, this kid Fred, who later became a tattoo artist, he's like, "It says Doug Free," and the guy, my roommate at the time, he's laughing, and he's like, "What? Shut up!" He goes, "No, seriously, it's misspelled. It doesn't say it." And like his face turned bright red. Anyways, make a long story really short, he ended up having to get his whole back done just to cover it up because it's such a hard process. But I mean, and then I don't even think he wanted to be a tattoo guy. That's the only tattoo he ever got in his life, and he always said that too. He's like, I only want to get this little one, and it became a living nightmare.
It has to become a cover up. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I know someone that has had the first tattoo was a tiny little SXE in the back of, like, in the middle of their spine on their back.
Yeah.
And I know they're not straight edge anymore. And it's funny because I'm like, I wonder what they covered that up with. But
Yeah, probably something. I don't know. I mean, that's something you can do. I feel like we should gear back to some good old fun art on things. Do you work on a lot of different textures besides, like, paper and canvas and?
well, usually for, I don't know. Usually if I'm gonna do a sketch, I usually just grab the closest piece of paper I can find that's clean,
Yeah,
and that's what I'll just do the sketch on. I never really think about texture. For watercolor, it's a lot different because you kind of need that specific watercolor paper because of the way it wrinkles and everything.
right.
So I'm a little more picky about that. But yeah, generally I just grab whatever I have. If I'm doing usually like pencil or something like that.
Yeah, for me, like, I think it became part of my style and who I am. Like, I didn't. I'm still kind of cheap about supplies. Like, I shouldn't be. I've been doing it for so long, but for the most part, I'm kind of like, I don't want to spend like on the greatest paper ever. I use pretty good stuff, but so I started, and it was cardboard was like my first. That was the first thing I worked with was cardboard,
Your
and
first
then
blank canvas.
yeah, that I started selling. It was that. It was an old comic book that I shredded it, and then I glued it together, and then I painted on top of that. Like, it was all kinds of experimental, I don't have any money kind of things, like a Pop-Tart box, or one of my famous things I always talk about in interviews and stuff is this old dictionary that I found from like 1946, and I still have it today. And so it kind of became part of, I'll work on everything and anything. And what I noticed from it is you definitely kind of get a relationship with whatever you're working with, whether it's wood, weird kinds of paper, scraps. It's, canvas. It's such a different connection you get with it, and the outcome, I feel, it could be totally different. Your kind of hand and your brushwork hits it in a different way. So I think it's fun to experiment with different textures like that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Have you ever done stuff on like colored paper, like tan paper or like gray paper?
Yeah, I think you got me a sketchbook actually. It was gray, and I liked it a lot for a little bit, and then I don't think I could find the same one, and but that was it. It was just like I enjoyed it while I had it, and then no,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
guess approaching something like that, you kind of have to have a little bit of a different mindset. I guess you can still keep the same creativity aspect of, kind of just throwing stuff down and seeing how it flows, but harder to just throw pencil on gray or something.
Yeah, like different materials work better on it, and it kind of just gets you going into it. I just worked on black paper last night. I don't do that often, and but obviously you have to use white if you're gonna go on there for the most part, anyways, because color doesn't show up too good on there. But yeah, it definitely gives you a different experience, and then the end result, I feel like you would not have done the same thing on a regular canvas or blank paper. Canvas is actually one of the worst kind of materials if you think about it, unless it's a really big painting. What do you think? Like, you like regular canvas?
I don't work on canvas that often, but I remember when I first started doing canvas, I would get mad because I was very light with my paint. I think I started in oil because I didn't really like acrylic because it dried too fast for my taste. But
Yeah.
I would work with oils, and I was a very timid painter when I started. So like I would barely touch the paint on the brush, and I would kind of just like caress it across the canvas, and then it would leave all these little tiny white dots. And I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, son of a bitch, like God, this painting sucks. I gotta fill in all these little dots. So I feel like you have to kind of have more of a very measured kind of approach where you're actually, throwing paint on with intent and purpose. Like, you mix up a real nice blue and you just slobber it on there and just smash it onto the canvas and you kind of just got to get everything on there, cover up all your little white dots on the canvas.
Yeah, like I remember when I was a kid, I had this painting in my head and I wanted to make it. And I was probably like 10 or 11. One of the only times I worked on canvas back then. And it did not turn out the way I wanted to at all. And I felt really intimidated by canvas for a long time. I felt like in school, if you ever had a project like an art class, I'm talking high school, junior high, it just really bored the hell out of me. I thought like painting on canvas sucks. I just thought like, this is such a weird, hard thing for me to understand. And it wasn't until I was about 19, working on cardboard actually, and then I transferred it to canvas, the same technique. It was just kind of like you just go in for it and, you know, don't worry about stuff. And you could do it any way. There's, for me, then this is just my part of my style, but there's really no right or wrong way to do it. Just put the work in and work it until you're happy, until you feel like it's finished. And that approach just really helped me out because I didn't even know art could be done that way for so long. I was never exposed to much art as a kid.
Yeah, I think maybe something like Canvas can be a little intimidating to some people because Canvas is basically that's the cream of the crop. That's what all the, masters in the art in the painting world, Da Vinci and Van Gogh and stuff, like, man, those guys were using Canvas. That must be like something that, you have to be a super professional genius to be able to use Canvas. So I feel like it can be a little bit intimidating.
Yeah, like you almost approach it differently when you start painting. You're like, because most artists, they start off with a pencil and crayons and that kind of thing is your first. It's just that hand. Then you go into paint and you're like, what? This is not this is not doing what my drawing did for me. But if you approach it a different way, I feel like it's the same thing really. It's almost better than drawing because you could take a big brush and there's your red and it's a ton of red. And then you could take the same brush or a different one, and even if it's still wet, you could just apply another color and now you got you almost have a new environment. You just took two colors and it's going to dry and be this weird thing. And then from there, you might have the whole thing covered. And that is so much less intimidating, I think, than a lot of people. What they'll do, and what I used to do, is you would draw on the canvas, it's blank, and then you would like paint around it and all that, and it just never would it would never look right when it's done. You almost could like look at it and go, "Oh, I know what you did here. You
Right.
painted the character, and then you tried painting the background around it, but you made it all stupid." you know?
Yeah, and sometimes there's like you might leave the line a little bit white, like that canvas, like the white dots kind of thing, where you're like, you don't want to get too close to it because you're kind of like that's the edge. And yeah,
Yeah,
I found myself doing that a lot, where I'm like, man, I wish I would just threw the whole background in and then like just did right on top of that, and like, yeah,
yeah. So I always that's what I'll do. I'll paint the whole thing. And like, I just had to paint a 6 foot painting I finished last weekend, which one of the biggest paintings I've done, 6 by 5 foot, and it was actually a recreation of a smaller work that I had to do, which kind of makes it more difficult. But that's what I did. I just painted the whole thing, several layers, and then from there I added the figures that were on it. And if I did it the other way around, if I drew it first, it would have been a nightmare, to do that. The only thing I noticed that drawing helps out was when I had to do graffiti, legal graffiti, uh, and I've never done it. So what I did is I bought these they're called hobo markers. And so what it did is I was really intimidated by spray paint. So what I did is I just kind of drew it out. I drew a sketch first, and then I drew it on the wall with the hobo markers, and then I almost like a coloring book, like just sprayed it in, and then added some shading and stuff. But talk about intimidation. A building, like a brick wall building. It's like, and the scale is humongous on those kind of things. So it's like,
Yeah, and it's 100% public. A sketch you're doing in your house, you can, if it's bad, just crumple it up and throw it away. But
yeah. And what I did to help me through it is just like gonna do my thing, because it was really overwhelming. I'm not the hardest thing about graffiti for me is your hand almost locks up because your muscles aren't used to it. So it's like that motion of like holding that, and your fingers all bent.
yeah.
Your finger almost locks up completely where you can't even push down anymore. And that was the hardest part for me. It was just like I'm not used to it.
Yeah, well, I guess if you're a professional graffiti artist, you got a really, really muscular pointer finger.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you start when you're young, so that and you might even get arthritis by the time you're 50. You're like,
Yeah.
don't do that anymore. So
Oh, used to have a good index finger. You kids should have seen it.
that's how you talk when you're 50.
Well, yeah, 50 at least. You were talking about like a little bit of your process of painting, and it reminded me, I think I heard something, I'm probably going to butcher this. It was something along the lines that creating art is nothing more than a series of smart decisions based on experience.
Yeah,
So if you think of painting, generally, what you'll do is you'll do one thing, you'll kind of look at where you're at and say, okay, I need to do this now. You'll do that one thing, then you'll make another decision. You say, okay, now that I have this, what's next? And you keep doing that until you've made all the best decisions you could and you have a final piece. Does that sound somewhat accurate?
yeah. And I mean, it almost goes down to what I was saying earlier about like you make a decision in life and you move forward. It's the same thing with, and especially if you want to think of like a masterpiece or something like that, and
Hmm.
or to me, I've been living off my art so long. It's like I don't want to make a piece of art that I'm not going to show for the most part, or that I don't want someone else to fall in love with. So, yeah, every decision is really important, but I feel like the more you do it, you don't think about those decisions. You just act.
Right, it becomes natural.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like exactly, and I guess that's from the experience. The other weird thing though for me is like my favorite part of art is not knowing what's going to happen next, and seeing what happened, almost like live entertainment.
You're live entertaining yourself.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of that's what it is. It's like in a weird way, like you're in control, but I think there's also something else that's like guiding you. If that makes sense. It's a weird stage, but I don't know. I experience that all the time. It's like I have no idea when to make. I'm making it. It's happening. Uh, the brush might do a thing that you were out of your control, or who knows what, and then at the end of it, you're like, wow, I didn't know I was going to do that. It's kind of it's a really weird feeling.
It
But
just
I
comes
love.
together.
Yeah, it's one of the main reasons I think I love creating stuff. Bah, bah, bah.
Yeah, I was thinking back to, when we first started was the idea of uh, my thinking about blank canvas. If I'm doing something that is intentional, I want to do something with a bumblebee. So what I'll do is I'll go to Google and what does a bumblebee look like? And I remember one of the times we were hanging out. I think we were doing something, and it was kind of like I forget what it was, but it was, I think I wanted to draw like Wolverine or something. And
Yeah.
then so I was like gonna Google Wolverine, and you were like, no, wait, I want to see what you think Wolverine looks like, or something like that. And so it's like my version of Wolverine, but that's not right. You know, my
Yeah,
version of Wolverine isn't the right version, but it would be a version in my head that would be my version, I guess,
right.
which might even be more interesting.
Yeah, I don't remember saying that, but it sounds like something I would say because I'm enjoying hearing that. It's funny. Yeah, I think that's awesome to do stuff like that. That's a great approach, I feel like, where you tell kids or anybody, you're like, because like, I mean, that's one of the things that they said about Dr. Seuss is that he would create these worlds and he would never reference anything.
Mhm.
And the worlds he created looks, you could tell Dr. Seuss. It's totally him.
Yeah,
Um,
that sounds about right. Thinking of like Dr. Seuss books, even like, shoes and stuff that people are wearing, we're all like kind of weird and floppy and wonky. Just kind of, it's basically like somebody thinking about what a shoe looks like and then drawing that.
Well, yeah, and I feel like that's who you really are. I mean, that's for me, that's my thing with art is like when you do more things like that, then after so many times you do it, then you could take something, look at reference, and you know how you'll make it your own
Hmm.
rather than just kind of copying it a little bit, you know. It's because you can get so influenced by a picture, I feel like,
Yeah, yeah,
which sometimes you need to be influenced by the picture because it has to look accurate. You know, I've had things where I had to make like a Michael Jackson look like Michael Jackson, and if you don't do little things right, you're going to be totally off target.
right. Yeah, or if you have to like make a bicycle. A lot of people I think don't know how a bicycle looks by memory, I think.
Yeah, well, that's actually something for our one video game I didn't reference. There's,
Oh yeah.
there's there's a guy on a bike in the background, and I kind of enjoy doing stuff like that. I don't know, it's like you don't do it accurately, but and you somehow got it to work.
Yeah, that kind of took on a life of its own. So yeah, you did this weird guy. It's a background of uh, an environment for Fright Show Fighter, the game we did, and it was a creepy guy on a bicycle, but the one tire was so oval that I cut your drawing up to make it animatable. So I cut the bicycle out on one layer, the guy on another layer, and then the wheels on separate layers. And as I rotated the wheels, so they were in sync, the bike would go up and down because of the wonky wheel.
Right.
But for something like that, it worked perfect. It was like, that's what happens like when you turn your imagination to life. It's like you can think of that bike in your head, but then to see it actually like work in real life as if it's in some kind of crazy world where everything is possible. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the world I need to live in. Like that's the world I that's kind of the world I created around myself. I surround myself with is like that. Anything is possible, and you know, go for that kind of stuff. Like, don't worry about what already happened or what everyone else thinks. Just kind of roll with your own fresh, interesting ideas. And I love that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I hope like the concept of blank canvas for, any type of artist listening, hopefully it relates to things like, a fresh ball of clay if you're a sculptor, or a fresh, Word document, I guess, if you're like a writer or something. Think if the idea that, you have something that you want to accomplish and then, just approach it in different ways. I feel like it's somewhat comparable to whether you're doing painting or drawing or
Yeah.
a lot of creative things.
Well, as you were saying, I was realizing like the one thing that I think translates for all this stuff is the little practice sketches, the little practice notes. If you're writing something, you want to have little notes. If you're sculpting, you probably have little doodles maybe that you just kind of reference. Those things are really helpful. And on the other end, they're just purely going in for it. Like you purely dive in. Like maybe you what you want to make. You don't know how you're gonna get there, but if you just start and just dive in, you're gonna find all the pieces along the way. At least I believe that. That you'll have a beginning, you'll have a middle, you'll have an end, and or you'll get to the end and you'll realize how you got there, depending on what your subject matter is.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe that piece that you make will inspire you in some way for the next piece you make, and you might have learned skills that while doing that you realize, oh, I can apply this to something else. The way I laid down this paint, or the way I put this texture on a sculpture. Like that's really cool. Like it inspires me to do something different that utilizes that in a different way.
Yeah, and I think what I forget is I don't know how important that is, I think, for people to do for themselves. It's like not only are you completing something, which I'm sure I know that I saw studies where it's like that's so much good. It's so much better for your brain and your confidence, and um, to be able to make something, it gives you like an extra advantage over other things. So many people don't ever explore that side of themselves. I think they might be afraid to, but it's never too late. And once you get that done and you keep doing it, it's like you start to develop this talent, your own little talent, your own little traits. And I just think it's got to be so good for your mind and your soul, and it's pretty deep, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, and while you're saying that, I was thinking like, being able to do something and accomplishing something gives you a good sense of pride. I was thinking about Bob Ross,
Yeah.
because Bob Ross takes paintings and he basically tutorializes them, so it becomes a formula. And if you've watched, 101 Bob Ross episodes like I have, you realize that everything he does is a formula. So he's not really painting anymore, he's just following a certain amount of steps. So if you want to start painting, follow along with the Bob Ross, because eventually you'll come up with something good. But once you are happy and you're proud that you did a good Bob Ross painting, move on to your own stuff, because everything Bob Ross does is formulaic and can be repeatable, which is not really the best for, original artwork, but it's a good starting point to make you feel good about yourself.
Yeah, there's a weird thing with a lot of art. Like I've said this about so many artists. They'll be like, once you own one, blah blah blah, you own them all. And I think probably if you own two Bob Ross paintings, you probably don't think, unless you're collecting them for money or something, you're probably not like, well, I need another one. You know what I mean? It's not like you're getting something new and fresh out of getting the third one.
Right.
Um, so I always think it's good to explore several different areas rather than just I think a lot of artists become this one thing, and then that's what they are, and then it's almost impossible for them to get out of that box they created for themselves.
Yeah. Or it's scary for them. A lot of times, your art is your identity, and changing your identity can be scary.
Yeah, yeah, it's a weird thing. I think for me, I'm happy that I always made my identity be like a formula. It's this, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's that, it's that, it's that, and then it can be applied to anything. And
Hmm.
I completely did not try to box myself in, because I don't think I'd be able to live with that. You know,
Yeah. Well,
like
you do what you love.
yeah, you should. You definitely should. Like I think some people might fall into those weird little traps. You might get an agent or something, or maybe every time you make one of these, it always sells. So then you're like, well, I'm not going to try anything else. I want to sell it. You know.
Yeah,
Um,
you might say that about like some like bands, right? Where the bands are, oh, you're making some big hits. Don't change your style because you're making big hits, and that's what the people want. Even though the
yeah,
band might, want to try and take a different direction, you're kind of pressured into that.
yeah, and I think most artists want to explore further. It's just you could fall into different traps. I was listening to a good interview with the guy from the Smashing Pumpkins, and he was talking a bit about that, and it was pretty fascinating to hear. That like for him, everybody wants to hear his classics, his hits.
Hmm.
He used to hate doing that, but now he wants to make his fans happy, and then that lets him do it. Otherwise, it would drive him crazy.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah, I mean, that must be hard to imagine. It's like you built this huge career, this huge thing for yourselves, and now you almost have to always be a certain thing that you wore, and that's what you have to be forever. It's a weird way to paint yourself in a small box of things.
Yeah, totally, I agree.
So
And
explore the canvas, go far, reach out.
yeah, I think we're coming close to the end. So I mean, if you want to ask me anything, I think now's the time.
Um, is there like the best trick or tip that you've uncovered with doing what you do? I don't know if that's similar to things I've asked in the past, but
Tips or tricks with doing what I do. Uh, in general, with just art, I guess, or
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's like I think everybody always wants the easy thing. What's your secret? What's your trick? Or I think people always look for that kind of thing. So is there any that you have,
so.
if there's one?
I think I can think of one thing I can always think of is that when I'm making something, uh, no matter what it is, sculpture, painting, pumpkin carving, whatever. When I'm making something, my intention is to make that for the peers that will are doing the same thing. So if I'm making a painting, my intention is that when somebody else looks at it that also does that same thing, they can appreciate, the work that I put into it. So if I'm doing like 3D modeling or even animation, I'll think to myself, all right, if some other 3D modeler looks at my edge loops, I want them to be like, man, those are some clean edge loops. This thing is animating beautifully. So I would say to anybody out there, like a lot of times when you make art, your friends and family are gonna be like, "Oh, that's so cool. That's so awesome." Well, of course it is because they might not be artists and they're like your other friend or their family, so they're gonna say, "Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool." And it might be cool, but they're gonna say that no matter what. But I would tell people, don't try to make stuff to impress your friends and family. Don't impress your mom. Impress the painter who's been painting for 30 years and looks at your stuff and says, "Wow, those are some really good techniques," or "That's some really good shading," or "That's good contrast." So make stuff to impress people that are worth impressing, I would say. That's my tip.
I like that tip a lot, and I'm gonna use that and go in a different direction because I have an opposite approach, and that's actually Todd McFarlane, the guy who created Spawn. He has a very similar approach to what I have. I realized after listening to him, and he just tries to make himself really happy. And I noticed that's a thing with a lot of writers and things. It's like, so that's one of my approaches. Is it's not always thought after, but it's a simple trick sometimes where I'm like, what would what would make me really excited and happy about that, and then I'll dive in and just try to make me feel really good about it. Um, because sometimes those and we have a different style, so sometimes those great artists, they've shot me down and insulted me and like buried me almost. You know what I mean? So I've always been scared of those kinds, or not even scared, but don't want to show them. I just want to do what I think is really awesome and kick ass, and then that's all I need. You know what I mean? And then it finds its audience, and that's thankfully it finds its own audience. But yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think that's probably why our approaches are different. When you try to appeal to the greats, it's pretty intimidating. I think it's pretty like serious stuff to me, it's definitely a good thing if you could do that. If you could impress like artists of 50 years or whatever you're going for,
I'd say
definitely helps.
it's a goal at least. But I'd say when your mom says, "Oh, I love your painting. It's so nice," I would say take it with a grain of salt, people. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had some moments because I've done things besides like painting and drawing, and whenever I'm always scared to show other things I do to people. Like when I started making film, I was really scared to show anybody. And the same thing with music. I still am kind of scared to show people. So whenever a musician or a filmmaker enjoys what I do, going back to what you said, it does feel like very legit and makes you feel really good. It's like that's amazing. That's what you do. Um, so if you can do it, it definitely helps.
Yeah.
But and that's where we're gonna wrap up, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, we can wrap up there.
I mean, unless you want to sing a song.
Do you want me to ask you something, or
Didn't I already do that?
you asked me?
Yeah. Oh, you didn't ask me? Oh boy, there we go. I thought I was going from the same thing. Go
Hey,
ahead.
third episode's the charm. Yeah, I was thinking when we were talking about commission work, is there ever commission work that you've done where somebody wanted something and you're just kind of like, I don't want to do it, but I'm gonna do it anyway. And then you make something and you completely hate it, but you give it to them and they love it.
That has happened. Yeah. I'm trying to think of an example of that.
Well, no need to name names or anything, but I mean that's
Yeah.
something. And I can't imagine you'd be proud of something like that, right? You're just kind of like, eh.
Yeah. Sometimes you gotta do it. Sometimes you need to get the money, and it's the way I pay my bills.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's hard. Sometimes it's hard for me to refuse business. And when I was saying earlier, I will refuse things that are like against my morals or that kind of thing. I'm not doing that. Um, but yeah, sometimes you're like, I don't feel like doing that. But I made a piece where I had to propose. The guy used it to propose to his fiance. Did I bring this up in a past episode?
I don't think so.
Okay, good. Um, yeah, so I had to do that, and I was like, don't really want to do that, but but I did it, and I gave it my all, and I kept trying to like reference other paintings I've done that he liked, which made me feel good about it. But I did say I'm going to really commit to this. It's not that fun. I'm going to really commit to it until I feel good about it, because I didn't
Yeah.
want to. I know a long time ago I used to hand off pieces that I really didn't like, and I'd just be like, well, that's what happens. And you kind of like hold your breath to see the reaction. I did have a customer love everything I made, commission me, and it became the end of our of everything. It actually happened twice with the same customer,
Oh,
where
geez.
where they got the commission, hated it, insulted me so bad, and then apologized years later, and we kind of rebuilt the same thing by buying new pieces and all this, and then like, hey, I'm gonna do a commission. And then the exact same reaction, like, I hate you, I hate this. Like, I mean, we're talking like the worst reaction you can get.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah, like just every insult in the book. And then years later, like they'll like watch something like a movie I did and give it like a really bad review. And
Well,
like,
that's the business.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, commissions are weird. You want them to just say, do your thing because I trust you because I love your work. But a lot of times they want to become the director, and then it's like anything when there's too many voices, it distorts the art. The art can get
Too many
lost.
cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, sometimes only one. That's all it takes, one extra cook.
One extra cook, and now they want to throw garlic in your pumpkin pie.
Yep. And that's. I,
Classic
ho-
euphemism.
I hope I answered your question good on that one.
Yeah, you did. I think the people love it.
Cool. Yeah, and I didn't mean to cut off the. I didn't mean to end it quick the way I
Yeah.
was.
No, no, no. But I think now is the end. Though we're just about the end of the
Yep.
topic of blank canvas. Hopefully, we've given some good advice, and people can not be as afraid to approach a new project.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, and we will be back in like a week or something, so check it out.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Boo, boo.
Bye.